My dad, he's like watching him pass away. It makes you believe. It really should do.
Sorry. I thought we had some control.
I haven't grabbed my computer. Oh, no, she does. Go.
All right, sounds good. I will go ahead and call the USD 49 Board of Education, KNEA, negotiation meeting for May 20th, 2015.
Okay. All right. Did you prepare more proposals?
Yeah. The first thing I was just going to go through was to find out, I guess, real quick, just to kind of go over the schedule piece as well. I guess I had some confusion on my part, just to see where we were at, because I thought we had actually set the schedule, but it sounds like there's some changes now in June or something that certain people aren't going to be able to be here. Or...
Yes. We have. Oh. We have, I think, a meeting set for next week.
May 26th at
Yeah, we
have a meeting set for May 26th. The week of June, the first week in June, we're not going to be able to meet. The second, we're going to be able to meet on the 9th, if you still want to meet then. Are you good for this week? Okay. And then that following week, we're not going to be able to meet. Then we can meet that week after that.
What was the last date?
June 9th. Oh,
No, the one after that?
The
16th,
16th.
the 23rd, and the 30th were the ones that I had on the calendar.
You can't meet on the 16th, but can on the 23rd.
Yes. What's that? Okay.
we are meeting on the 16th or not?
We are not.
Okay.
We have on the 9th. Yeah.
26, 9, 16, and what were the times?
5, I think.
Yeah.
But not the
5,
16th.
8.
Not the
I'm sorry.
16th.
Right.
Oh, not the 16th?
No.
No.
23rd.
23rd.
And then did you guys have the 30th down as well?
I don't have it yet.
I don't think we.
You do have it now?
I don't
think we-
I don't have
That
that.
was- yeah, okay.
It seemed like that was the goal,
Um,
and I thought that was where.
I think we went through that. First day, we set the whole, we just said we were going to do
Yeah.
every Tuesday from 5 to 7 in the month of June.
Are we possibly able, or would anybody be willing to possibly maybe go a little longer on the other ones, just so we can maybe try to get some more of that stuff done if we're going to have two meetings we're not there with, or I don't know what everybody's schedule
Well,
looks like.
We could look at, I mean, I'd like to have a chance to talk with our group, but
Sure.
the possibility of maybe meeting a different day, because if we just go longer, that doesn't give us any chance to do any research or anything on the issues. So we could, if you want to look at a different day,
Okay.
within those weeks that we're available, then we could look at that. But just going longer, I'm not sure would be,
Okay.
it doesn't give us a chance to.
Is that
Use
something
our
maybe
resources.
before 6th?
Uh-huh.
right? Is that something maybe that you guys can talk amongst yourselves before
Uh-huh.
that next meeting and maybe see what other availability you guys have? And maybe if need be, we can either move them to another day.
Well, we
or-
could even go to a little caucus today and visit about that. We'll do that today before we leave, and then we can take care of that.
Okay.
Okay.
And these are, no, I thought I did. You're my secretary, so I'm a little disappointed in your job performance. This should have basically the rest of the items, not including the things that we previously talked about and or proposed, and then as well as we're still working on salaries and early retirement. So everything else that's on the list should be in this. And
This is where we're at now. There may be some additional changes to it, but
those items we listed were not complete on their own,
And basically what I was, I guess, thinking on this round as far as, I know last time we kind of went through line by line, but I was almost thinking we may kind of go through this. I'll kind of just highlight some bullet points as far as the different areas that are on there. And then that, give you guys a chance to go back and look at them, because I mean, we can go through and look at each individual line, but I think it kind of ends up taking way longer and we don't really accomplish much. Like I said, it's mainly just a proposal, but that way you guys can kind of go back with your group, look at it, see what's been changed or what you agree or don't agree with. And then we can possibly go over them next time, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll go through it fairly quick, and that way the stuff we've already proposed to you guys, that way you guys have some time to go through all of that as far as anything, you guys want to discuss on it as well, so. The first section there, page 6, I believe it's 2C. That was basically just and I think those should be redlined copies as well, and highlighted. That was basically just an editorial change in the language, so nothing big there. Page 18, section D, I believe. We were omitting the entire section as it's basically addressed in the leave section. Let's see here, page 33. We're basically looking at omitting sections 1, 2, and 3 and adding new language. At the bottom, you'll see some of the new language we've added, but basically allowing the board to make the final decision on health insurance decisions, giving them a little bit more budget flexibility, and then basically setting a dollar amount that's constant or unless there'd be agreed to change. And that's kind of just the base stuff that we started with there. And obviously, it's just a starting point. So, page 39, section A. That was basically just the general statement there. We were basically changing the language that basically puts the expectations on the teacher on that particular policy to be informed of the policy. Section D, basically changing the language to hold the teacher more accountable for their action. And B, basically holding administration accountable by requiring a letter to be placed in the staff member's file. And that's in section D on that one. Page 40, which was section E, or the suspension without pay. Several changes on that one. Basically, repeatedly violating the board policy should not be a prerequisite for disciplinary action. Basically allowing due process as required by law, as is reflected in the rest of the agreement. And the rest of it, we're basically looking at deleting all other language. This is the duty of the administration to do that. Let's see here. Pages 41, I think these are all part of the same here. 41, 42, 43, and 44 for the termination and non-renewal. And we're basically looking at omitting all language that deals with tenure and due process. Basically leaving the due process will be there as law requires. The next section there, I believe in B, I believe it is here, let me find that. We basically want the best staff member for the position, not just the one that's been here the longest. And then C, the other portion there, basically adding language on recall to assure the best staff members are selected to be recalled with the sole decision of the board, and still takes length of service, degrees, training, evaluations, and recommendations of principals into the selection process. And that, I believe, is the highlighted portion there. Pages 44 and 45. Let's see here. Basically omitting the second paragraph It's basically addressed in the hours and amount of work section in the contract in Article 2.
Say that again.
Omitting basically the second paragraph on page 44, down at the bottom, the contract requirements, as it's already addressed in the hours and the amount of work section of the contract in Article 2. I think I'm reading that correctly, aren't I, Bill?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here. Section B, basically just an editorial change, deleting when employment of all teachers are acted on. It's the third Friday in May. And C, the release from contract, add the section that has liquidated damages for late resignation. And again, that ties into the other piece that we were just talking about. Basically, we want to hire the best candidates. Late resignation obviously makes it difficult to hire the best teachers due to the fact that they're all hired in earlier in the spring. Page 59, Section E, which is communications by employees to the Board of Education.
This is just one that, I mean, the board has no ability to tell, I mean, as a whole can't tell an individual board member what to do. I mean, they can invoke policy, but if that board member chooses not to follow it or doesn't follow it, there's no enforcement power to it. So it just, I don't think, and then
Just following the
and then
chain
some of the
command.
rest of it too is just covered by policy that, and by law, that, I mean, it just allows for, at least the last paragraph is, so.
And basically stating the chain of command should always be followed. Page 65, and that would be subsection 1. Let's see here, the last paragraph, we're basically doing away with that. Undue burden to state the obvious, basically the board reserves the right to transfer personnel. In subsection 2, we're looking at basically deleting this section, voluntary transfers, it would be paragraph number 3, I believe. Again, we want the best candidate for the position. Page 69, section F, arbitration of interest option. It's basically just a restatement of the grievance process. We deleted arbitration from the grievance process. And I believe those are the changes we have so far in this. Like I said, we figured that way you guys at least have the reasons or what we're doing, and that way you guys can talk about it and go over things. And I guess it's just a starting point from our end. And we figured that way there's plenty of time for you guys to go over the stuff that we had proposed before, or come back over that as well.
Okay. Well, the things that are, you have several things on here that are addressed in your notice letter. You have several things on here that were added to your notice letter, and then you have more things that you're adding today that you didn't talk about even at the first meeting. So those things, we're working off the notice letter.
Okay.
So some of these things are things that, there's no obligation to address those changes if they were not on the original notice letter.
Well, I guess I'm looking at it, we're trying to work at this at a team, so we can try to get this done, so I understand if that's the case, but I would ask, at least consider them, at least look at them, so we can go through and try to work together on this and try to get some. Again, they're just proposals, it's not
Right.
like it's set in stone.
Right. When we had interest-based bargaining, we did that, but the board abandoned that process, and so we work off notice letters now. So if those are things that are not on the notice letter, and they're not things that we have an interest in changing, and they're not things that we have any obligation to counter-propose. Correct?
It's your choice.
Okay.
What goes around comes around.
So you guys are
Right.
basically stating that you're not going to look into any of the things
Well,
that
let's
we
get a
presented
list.
here.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
if you guys are saying you're not going to negotiate certain things, tell us what they are that you're not going to negotiate.
We're going to work off your list.
Okay.
I mean, it's substantial
But
already.
if we want, I mean, we can go down and try and argue about what the words mean and if they tie together, and you have a list that you provided too, so those things that you've listed, if we have a proposal on what you've listed to negotiate, we can argue about whether we can or can't. We don't want to do that, but we've put out what we want to talk about, so if the position is that it wasn't listed or it wasn't listed in the right way, we'll do that, and we'll take those off the table. But
You know,
understand that our position is that we want to discuss those.
And last year, when we wanted to discuss due process, you know what our answer was from you guys? It wasn't on your notice letter.
No.
Yes, it was. That's what we were told. It wasn't on the notice
But,
letter,
no.
correct?
It was brought to them and they discussed it, and I brought back, I think.
We-
I was going to say, when I said it, I don't remember ever hearing somebody say it wasn't on there, we wouldn't discuss
They
it.
did discuss that.
Yeah.
Nobody discussed it with us.
Well, that's one of the reasons you got the whole board as part of our team.
So if that's the case, like I said, I guess if you want to go through and let us know in the section here of the areas then that you're not willing to discuss.
Okay. What we can do is we will go through and, I don't think we'll do it here. I think we can go
No, and
through.
that was
We
just
can
to
go through and
clarify.
just, on any change that you've put on here, we can say, and we can come up with a counter proposal.
And that was the reason, like I said, just to clarify, that was the reason I kind of went through these kind of quick. That way we're not spending time, because I figured you guys are going to want time to read through everything, see exactly what we've proposed, and have you guys be able to discuss on your end and
Sure.
come up with counter proposals. And
Okay.
I just figured it'd be a lot better use of everybody's time rather than trying to go through it line by line
All
and
right.
going back and forth. So if there's certain areas you guys would like to discuss, I'm open to that. I just figured that would be a better use of everybody's time. That was the only reason I said that, so.
Just as a general question, on some of these proposals, I know that it's been a discussion prior that the contract is too lengthy, that it's convoluted, that it repeats itself and that sort of thing. Now, am I incorrect in possibly trying to see our negotiated agreement as a document in which teachers can go to hopefully reference to understand what their rights as an employee of USD 489 are? In that aspect of like, is to chain of command and that sort of thing, and those different items of whatever it might possibly be in communication and those sorts of things. Is this not, because I myself truly would not feel like I would go to board policy to find out what my rights are as a teacher, to be able to understand how I communicate with my senior administrators, or if I wanted, if I wanted to be able to do that sort of thing. I don't think that I'd be going to a board policy handbook to do that. I would look at my negotiated agreement contract. And but I'm just asking,
Sure.
on those things that are in here, like that spell things out a little bit more definitively. Are we just getting rid of them because they're duplicated someplace else, but yet, as a worker, an employee here, that this should be the first place that I go?
And I would reiterate that the reason why it's in the contract is something happened.
Yeah.
In 82, 83, when they negotiated that item, apparently something occurred that
I agree.
pushed them into creating that language.
The drawback to that is nobody here at this table can say why that's in there. And so that's what you get when you do a contract like that. You've got 20 years of things that are in there, and nobody can say why it's still in there. And that was kind of some of the things we looked at. Does it need to be in there? Is it something that's just in there because 20 years ago somebody had an issue, that one person, I mean, even if that year, one person had an issue or two teachers had an issue, is it something you change your whole board policy on, or do you just deal with that one issue? Or not board policy, but your teacher's contract, I should say, or board policy for that
And
matter.
I think that's something we actually, honestly, I think even look to in our policy, because, looking at that is it right to go through and make a policy change just because of one issue that happens to come up? And I'm not saying,
And
I don't know what all the issues are.
I'm
just
thinking,
saying, in
based
general.
on the first paragraph, to me, it would have been the board that brought it to the
Which
negotiation
page?
contract.
Which page?
It's
yeah.
on page
Which one you looking
59. And I just remember in discussions after I got here, and probably it would be the late 90s, that there were issues of teachers calling board members instead of going through the superintendent. And then we would direct them to this contract and say, you cannot do that unless you're acting in the taxpayer format or...
I guess the way I look at it, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm not speaking for the board, but I mean, if any one of you wants to pick up the phone and call myself or call any one of us, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. I would hope that if it's something you're looking to change and everything, that obviously you've gone through the standard chain of command as you would at any place that you would work. You would talk to whoever your immediate supervisor is. If you're not getting the results you want, then I would assume you would go to the next step, which in that case would be probably, you might go to a department head first, you might go then to the principal, then you might go to the superintendent, and if that doesn't get resolved, then it would, I would assume, come to the board level. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody, no different than the general public or whatever, that they can't call me if they have questions or whatever. I mean, that's part of the reason we're in this office. So, again, that's my thoughts on it, but I guess that's part of what we're looking at as well, is, as Greg said, if some of this stuff, and I don't know what the reasons why some of the stuff was put into here. Maybe you're right, maybe it was something from a previous board as far as why it was
Well,
put
I
in
just
here.
know from previous experience that when we added things with contract, it was in reaction to
Sure.
something.
And maybe it was only one or two people, but maybe because we had changed the contract, that's why it didn't happen again. Maybe then that solved the issue from happening to 10 or 20 more people.
Is there anything else on that, Zach, that you had?
If I could just address, because I don't think anybody answered your question.
That's what I was
yet,
at. I didn't know.
but, I mean, there's times that you could, I mean, maybe the shorter solution might be to reference board policy in some of those, or, and that might make it clearer, but the only drawback to that is then if you're looking at this document, it says, well, go see this document, and you're flipping back and forth. But, the other headache, if you put them all in these different places, because we've talked about, you've got all kinds of different policy handbooks. If you change one, if you have them all look back to a central location, then when you change that one, every one of them changes. You don't have to make sure you've caught all of them, and then, you've got this staff person that's treated this way, and this staff person treated this way. Sometimes you may want that, but oftentimes you don't, and so that is a way to simplify that.
The only thing is when it's not in the negotiated contract, you can change the policy arbitrarily without any input from teachers, where if it's in the contract, you have to have input from teachers.
Right. I mean, that's the other side
That's
of
the
it.
drawback of taking it out of the contract.
And I guess in that idea of looking at two documents, a lot of these changes, when it comes to employee rights, it seems as though that we are referencing state statutes that are current law, and yet I know that I don't have the legal degree to necessarily want to have to interpret those statutes, nor do I have full faith in those who work in Topeka for us. And I'll gladly say that here and now, in the fact that I feel like on a daily basis, people throughout the state are getting stripped of individual rights, and to be able to have those things spelled out for an employee, it makes me, but I also do understand that that does require for us to go above and beyond what the state minimum requirement is. And I've always felt like our district has been exceptional at wanting to be able to do that, to go above and beyond what the state minimum is. And I thought that, for us, I think that that's something, for the way that some of these things in the contract, and and why we feel so passionately about certain things is that we like to feel and that oftentimes get to be able to be rewarded in knowing that we are exceptional at USD. But I just don't think that putting faith in the minimum of what the law requires is necessarily always in our best interest as a board, as an employee, and as a school district for future hirees and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I'll be glad to look at this wholeheartedly, but, I mean...
Zach, let me explain my viewpoint of this.
Sure.
As a teacher, you have a lot of rights. You have constitutional rights, you have statutory rights, you have processes that are adopted through the board by policy. Any of those can change at any time. The purpose of the collective bargaining agreement isn't to set out all of your rights, regardless of where they come from. It's just an agreement that you have with the Board of Education covering the specific subjects which the Professional Negotiations Act require to be negotiated. So you can't look at it as the wherewithal for everything, all of your rights in reading that agreement.
And even in the idea
It's
of...
impossible to do, and they change constantly. I mean, this contract now makes reference to tenure. You don't have tenure.
Right. And then, you know, in that idea of the sense of professionalism, I think it would be nice to be amicable to be able to tell a person as to why you're going to be transferred or why you will be terminated in those reasons. I think that's something that is demanded of the profession, is to be able to be given a reason as to why.
I think it's probably more fair to talk about, take the profession out, but I think it's that you're in, just as a professional, normally you're going to have that level of communication.
Right, yeah,
and I agree. But
yeah, I didn't mean as a teacher. I mean anybody who holds a profession. Those would be things that I would.
the drawback is the difference between most professions, and you either have a good boss or you don't. Some have great bosses that lay it out and do all those things. Some don't. And, you know, I mean, it's the more you get, you're going to have bad ones. You know, if you have enough principals, you'll have a bad one in there. It's just the law of averages.
You guys do an excellent job of hiring them.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to be careful, and I'm not trying to say we have a bad one, but I'm just saying if you have enough, you'll have a bad one, you know. And I mean, it's teachers or lawyers or whatever profession you go into. If you get enough of them in a room, you're going to have bad and good ones. They're not all the same. But, I mean, the difficult thing is to put that into writing on exactly how that's going to happen, to where it's got to happen exactly under this format and with these words. I mean, we could make the contract a lot longer than it is now, but, you know, I think when you're talking about just that issue, you know, if you get a bad principal that doesn't lay that out for you, we thought, you know, we'd open it up to where you can go to the superintendent directly and say, hey, I asked, I wasn't told, what's the deal? And then if he doesn't give you the answer, you can go to the board and say, hey, you know, is it whole or individually or however you want to do it? You don't have to jump through all the hoops to make sure you got just where you need to be, and then somebody come back and say, well, you missed this person, so go back and come see us next week.
On the proposals that you gave us the last time we were together, we have, I think the leave committee has done some work, and I think Zach will do a presentation on that. On the grievance procedure, we don't have a formal proposal yet, but I have some notes and some questions and things I want to ask about before we put together a counter proposal. And then on the hours and amounts of work, we also have some questions and concerns. So we can start. Do you want to start with the work that the leave committee did and kind of share with what you did with that?
Sure, we can definitely try. It is a work in progress for the leave committee in trying to come up with a little bit. Let's see. Yeah. Did I get one?
Is this the same that you did set, Zach?
Yep, with a few changes just because of the fact that I caught myself calling it sick leave versus PTO.
I'll
So try to
take
do
another copy.
clerical changes. But in terms of what our leave committee had discussed and everything, in terms of the paid time off, PTO, those sorts of things, seemed as though that they did propose, substantial benefits in that idea. However, in that we did not feel like the PTO of 11 days was necessarily the right amount, but we thought that if we were going to be allowed to accumulate and carry over, 11 days to be designated as such, and then be able to go in and talk about other forms of leave that were being classified as necessary for PTO, but yet differently. We try to address those here as well. But one of the sticking points at the beginning of hearing your first proposal was the whole grandfathering. And like you said, that they were proposals. We do want to hear back on different ways of possibly doing things for how accumulated leave could be handled and or a grandfathered idea. I also included, as you had mentioned, with your just most recent thing, that severance was in that hours and work, the severance pay was, but I also included it into the leave section for here as well, because that too wanted to be spelled out as to how severance pay could possibly look in the future. But for the accumulated sick leave, some of the big changes or differences is to taking a tiered approach. Tier 1 was to try to help those employees who, at least the current state, still have that availability and right to be able to use their severance pay as a part of their last 3 years of average salary upon retirement in that lump sum payment. And so as to making sure that those would be able to do so, to continue doing that while they're here. I mean, because if that's the case, it's those who were indicators prior to July 1st of 1993, thinking that that's already 22 years of service. If they were paying into the CAPER system and whatever leave that they might possibly have, as to seeing that as a retirement multiplier, that's something that I want that our committee seemed to feel needed to be protected. The tier 2, though, for licensed professionals of the district, if they were entering into the CAPER system after July 1993, which I think I see an error. Oh, did not, yeah, okay. A partial grandfathered benefit. Licensed professional employees who leave the district with a minimum of 5 years of service in USD 49, accumulated sick leave beyond the 100-day cap minus the first 20 days at the rate of $65. This is to buy down that cap, to be able to say that if you've already accumulated 100, well, that's too bad, but you can't spike it too bad. This is the idea to be able to say, and I try to give example 1 and example 2, that an employee A, that if they had 145 accumulated days, you would be able to subtract the first 20 because that's part of the contract that's currently still there. They'd have 125 days. To be able to pay them down to the cap, they would have a need for a payment on their 25 days, yet at the rate of $65 a day. An employee 2, let's say they had accumulated even more, because we know that that number is truly out there where more employees have a greater number. It would possibly require for a multiple year payment, but to try to say, and the working number is to say that the board would not, or the district would not be able to afford more than a 50-day payout in one interval. I don't know about that in terms of finances as to how amicable that might be. But once the Tier 2 employees have been paid down to their established cap of 100 days versus your 80 days, and here is one possibility onto the 100 days. The 100-day cap gives a teacher to be able to accumulate, or a licensed professional to be able to accumulate up to the equivalent of 5 months of sick leave. And 5 months of sick leave, plus if they were truly that direly ill, to be able to go and ask the sick leave pool for 20 days, it would get them another month to 6 months to where then they should be able to go on, from my understanding, full Social Security disability benefits.
You lost me on that, sorry.
Yeah, that's all.
The 5 months, that's which tier? Yeah.
Well, the 100-day cap, sorry.
That's how you came up with your.
That's how I came up with the 100-day cap, because then they would be able to go and request another 20 days from sick leave
Okay.
to be able to get them up to a 6 month, which I thought was the Social Security full disability was on at 6 months. If I'm incorrect on that, I don't know. But that would also be in the instance in which somebody would possibly be ill.
Yep.
Well, we've had instances like that where somebody becomes ill and took it, or maybe even in September get a diagnosis that is detrimental. I mean, but that was the possibility. And then Tier 3, those of us who have not accumulated 100 days of leave, that we build up to that 100-day cap. But this is the same formula that you try to spell out in your first proposal as to the $55 per day. Once we hit that 100-day cap, that for those under that next year's accumulation, that you'd be able to buy that back down, or you would pay that back down to the 100-day cap.
But you
No.
don't give up the 20 days.
But you would not give up the 20 days. Well,
That's why you go
That's the
55.
explanation on this.
Yeah.
That's the explanation on the severance. The $55 a day is to coincide with how the severance vesting was spelled out by the committee.
And that's, I'm sorry. which one was
Section
that?
C, you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah, it's on the back.
It'll be on the next page for you
Okay.
as to how that
Well, can I just
vesting table will go for it.
ask you, and I'm not trying to be overly critical, but, like your Tier 2, you got to have 5 years of service, right? Before you'd be eligible? Am I reading that right?
Sure, yes.
But you'd have to work 9 years before you'd even get to 100 hours.
Not even, you'd have to work 10 to get 100 days. We only get 11, so if you worked here for 9 years, you'd only have 99 days, and that's not using a single day.
Right, but you're just slightly, yeah, right, you got to get it that 10th year, but essentially 9 years. So, I mean, really the 5 years meaningless from our perspective.
On
Or from
On
anybody's,
Tier 2,
really.
you're right, because all it is, but that's just the same language that we have right now in the contract, the 0708 revision of a 5-year vested.
But we could get in
But if they,
a desire to get rid of unnecessary language, we could probably get rid of that because there's no way, I mean, now if we
Why-
jacked
why-
up the numbers,
That's true.
you could.
With
but-
people less than 5 years, they don't get paid out, correct?
so if I
Correct, but that's
resign,
what
if
we're
I
kinda
resign
talking
at my 6th year, you'd have to pay me for any days I have.
But we're just talking about accumulation.
Right, we're just talking about the accumulation. On the Tier 2 description, I put in the 5 years, but you had to have been in the district for 10 years to even
Right.
have over 100 days.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, they probably either ought to change it to 10 years or to, you might want to change it, if you went to
'Cause we
12
don't-
days, you might go to.
Well, the deal is, we don't allow for individuals to carry over any days in when they come into the district. I mean, they
Right.
start at 0, right?
Yeah.
So,
So you're moving on to C, is that where you're at, or?
Next page has the.
yeah, the C was, so on the severance pay, you had proposed a 10-year vesting period. The committee proposes to maintain the 5-year severance period. However, to still honor or reward longevity in the district allows for individuals to see the benefit in staying. If you leave within the first 5 years, there is no payout, same as the language is to this day on that. But after your 5th year of service and completion, that you would only be paid out at $45 a day for your accumulated sick leave. After your 10th year of service, this is your 55. This is the reason why the $55 is coinciding with the payout after 100 days, because that's what you could possibly have gotten after you left the district, that it'd take you 10 years to build up to that point.
Can I know this is a little bit off topic, but as we're looking at this next page, it reminded me of something we were going to address with you guys anyway, but can we all agree that as we go forward, that we take a master document, whether it be, if it's our proposal, that we start with that, and then as you guys make proposed changes to it, we do it off of that, we track changes?
Sure.
So that way, when we look at ours, and when you send us one, we can say, okay, here's all the changes they proposed, and then the nice thing about that is if we get down the line on this and you guys say, okay, we like that language, we can click accept, and then that goes away, and then we're just dealing with what we don't agree on. And
Sure.
it's just from a law, it might make it a lot easier.
Well, no, and actually, in terms of this document, I tried to begin with our master agreement, the negotiated agreement, because in a way, I wondered, because of some of the language that was spelled out in the last one, I started from scratch. I tried to start from scratch because I didn't know which leaves were to be counted as PTO and which ones weren't, because of that phrase at the beginning as to saying accept those forms of leave through sections E through D and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, well, I'll start with the contract that I think that I have an understanding of. So, but yes, track changes all.
And I just think, if we, maybe on this one, we start with what you guys prepared and we make our proposed, I don't know how it works, but just so we have a document that if we make changes,
It'd be a lot easier
we don't go
going
back to
forward.
the original, and then you got to try and correlate this to that, and it just makes your guys' job to figure out what we changed that much more difficult versus where we were at.
Sure. Then under the vestment, hopefully fairly seem pretty straightforward, and it gives you hopefully easy accounting, because once the tier 2 are paid down, you have maximum payouts of $6,500 for those after 15 years, $5,500 maximum payout, and those are all, like I said, maximums. Just to I think that's right. That might not be the right figure on the 5-year. Yeah, it is, because I think that's 99, because I think that's 99 days at $45. But in terms of trying to say that those people who have had 15 years of service in the school district to being granted the full $65 seemed pretty self-evident when we were given the report for even just our certified staff, that those certified staff with 15 plus years of service outnumber those who have fewer years of service, 114 to, well, there's 114 people, certified staff, that have 15 plus years of service. There's only 47 who have 10 to 14 years of service, and 51 of 5 to 9 service. And so, in trying to maintain that nobody is getting the rug ripped out from under them and payout for those.
Can you send us those numbers yet?
Did that?
This sheet.
Which one?
It was the sick leave liability that Tracy Kaiser had
Oh, okay.
worked up for
I
the
understand.
committee.
I just looked at that, actually.
The PTO sick leave pool language stayed the same, just a clerical change from calling it sick leave to PTO, being able to donate days in that regard, but that was just the change there. The committee didn't try to reword anything on the way that the pool was developed, accumulated, and contributed to.
And we didn't request any changes to the pool, did we?
I don't,
I think so.
I don't think so.
Okay, so this whole section,
yeah.
It's just
it's
the
just
same.
the language change. on it.
If it was a copy and paste on your guys' proposal, then it should be the same.
The only question I have, Zach, on that
Yeah.
is, where do we get the, second paragraph on the bottom, the 101,
The 225th,
Where does that date come from? Because I think we did have 189 or something on ours, but where does that come from? Do you know, anybody?
I don't know where the number is. I assume it would be from the number of actual work days plus days that would be considered typical vacation days. I don't know. It's been in the contract as long as I've been.
oh, yes, it is that, and that 225th is the exact same payment of a leave without pay
Yeah.
in section Q of, or it might be, of our.
It is Q.
Is it Q? But that was how, under the old contract, that's what the payment is of that 225th. I included the form that was there. It's something that the committee, our negotiations team, and a lot of teachers in hearing back from was quite honestly, the leave for serious illness and death of relatives, with only 11 days of PTO, and also being allowed for us to accumulate them, is really nice. But to think that to be able to still grant days for death of relatives and serious illness was a provision in which we wrote in here. And there too, once again, it's just another proposal. There might be some clerical changes that need to happen in section E as well on our part as to the way that things read out. But one of the possibilities that the committee had talked about, not necessarily the negotiations team, is the way that it's spelled out in section E for that.
Can I address that issue
Sure.
real quick with you? Because, I don't know. Depending on what bad luck you have in a given year, you could go 5 or more years and never use any of that benefit.
Right.
Or you could use,
All of it and then some.
well, yeah, you could have, but with the PTO days, one of the problems, and it kind of ties back to that, you said that the 11 days wasn't, or you guys didn't think it was sufficient, but the difference for us is this, is that when we give 11 days of sick leave, that's a benefit that we hope you never use. And I'm sure most people, if they really are sick, would just as soon work and not take a sick day. But when it's PTO days, the assumption's got to be that there's no, yes, whatever happened in your classroom, you're going to have to come back and fix or take care of. But you can take it off for whatever reason you want. So as the district, we've got to look at it and assume you're going to use every one of those days. Versus with the sick leave, you don't make that assumption.
But on the assumption of also being in a PTO world, industry standard is not 11 days. It's not even 20 days. It's closer to 30 days. And if that's the route in which we should be looking at it as, I mean, then I think that we're going to run into...
30 days
But-
is, that's over a month of
It's
leave
240
time.
hours, right?
Well, if you take, there's 21.65 working days in a month,
But it's 200, yeah. Mhm.
so, whatever
Based
that,
off of an 8-hour day, 30 days is 240 days, or 240 hours. I mean, because that's their,
Well, I'm
Those-
looking at, I looked at lots of different contracts since we last met, and they almost all have bereavement. I don't know that I saw any of them that didn't have some stipulation for bereavement. Even the ones that had, there are a lot of different setups for leave, but I saw bereavement in nearly all of them. And I wasn't actually looking for that, but I did notice it in a lot of them. So I think,
I mean,
agree.
if you have a teacher who's pregnant and she uses all her sick leave in her maternity, and then she loses a parent, she has no sick day, she has no PTO.
it's no different, you take that person out of the equation, take the pregnancy out, you've got that person that's got a runny nose, and every time they have a little ailment, they take off every day, and then later in the year, they've got a real good reason to be sick, maybe they're even really sick, or they have a death in the family. I mean, part of the PTO puts it on the employee to kind of manage that yes, I can use this all for vacation, or I can bank it all, or I can be sick all the time, but
I think the bereavement then does take into account that that isn't something you can control.
no.
I mean, we wish we could, but we can't control
No,
it.
but
So, you're right, that you could manage, you have some control over you have complete control over your personal days. You have some control over your sick days. Do you go to school when you have a little sniffle or a headache, or do you go to work? You have no control when your parents die. You
You
have no
don't at
control
all.
if a child dies.
But the other part you don't have control over, if your parents are sick and dying, that PTO allows you to take that time before they die to go spend with them versus
Sure.
to go to the
Well, so does-
funeral.
that's
So
right.
does our sick.
So does our sick leave. Our sick leave already allows that.
see, but
So-
I guess in my question too was that when you're only given 11 days per year, if you do have something that is catastrophic like that, you can't tap into those days that have already been banked.
Well, not even catastrophic, because look at
Well,
the
yeah,
influenza A or B that we had this year. We had some teachers off 5 days with that influenza. I mean, there's 5 of the 11, now they have 6 days left, and who knows what else is going around school.
I'm looking at Blue Valley right now, and it's 11 days, and that includes personal illness, serious illness of family, personal leave, which is whatever it could be, and bereavement and funeral leave. And then you start looking at these other ones, at least in that one.
Well, I mean, I think that
Gold standard.
they're great to look at. I mean, we could probably take them all and put a chart together and say, here's what they give, and then we can point to the ones that support our position, you guys point to the ones that support yours. And I mean, I think that the board would be willing to entertain something that looked at more than 11 days. But if you've got 11 days, plus you've got a potential for 30 days for bereavement in a given
See,
year,
and
that's tough to deal with.
That's the other thing that our committee had talked about, and that might not be something, though, that the negotiations team has been fully aware of or even on board with, but the committee that we put together put a cap on it at 10 days. And then it had, on bereavement, and then those days after 10 days had to be paid at the sub rate. And the same thing goes with serious illness. After those 10 days, had to be paid back at the sub rate. And then also that on the serious illness, that it says that leave remedy policies may require documentation for administrative approval. Because it seems as though that this whole rewrite is under the possibility of abuse. Because we talk about those who have a sniffle and call themselves sick and that sort of thing. And you're saying that that's a poor mismanagement, but as to what somebody else is or anything else like that, that is why, that is one of the reasons as to why the committee had formulated the idea of that, but we also took out the question as to whether or not if you needed to bereave because it was not an immediate family member.
Right.
Because, like you I think maybe even you said that there are those people who are closer to us in our lives that are to be able to say, well, it's only your father-in-law. Do you really get in, are you that good on,
Right.
in with your in-laws? Some of us can say yes, but I don't know. But like I said, it's a proposal, and
Well, I think, my thought process is now that you guys have come back with this, and I think now is, debate might not be the proper word, but now's the time where we go back and forth, I think, and try and take those two and merge them into one.
Find a happy
And,
medium.
That's how I look at it, and discuss it and figure out if we can come to some middle ground on it.
And I think this is great progress. I mean, have a proposal and a counter proposal, and then, I think this is moving us forward.
yeah, I don't know. But most, if not all, because I truly didn't know what the legal ramifications are on the idea of which leaves have to be identified because of different things to say. The Family Medical Leave Act obviously seems as though that's something that's needed, but
But again, is it needed? We're bound by it. Whether we state it in there or we don't, it's federal law. We have more, unless we get close to dropping below 50 employees,
We're required to offer it.
yeah, we have to follow the Family Medical Leave Act.
yeah.
So, I don't care if it's in there or not, but it's one of
Right.
those that really doesn't need to be in there, so.
But, and in all honesty, too, this, coming back to our negotiations team and everything, it's a,
So you guys are 15 days, is that right? Is that
No.
what you're asking for? No?
11.
we kept it with the same PTO
Oh,
because
you're right.
we didn't think that there was any,
11, but you want bereavement.
So
10
you
days on
want
top.
For the
11
unplanned.
for PTO, but an additional 10 for just for bereavement?
Up to.
Or is
Up
everybody-
to 10.
Up to 10
up to,
days.
because of the idea of it being unplanned. And that's the reason why none of the PTO, the PTO should be able to carry over, but none of the other leave can carry over. You're not,
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee.
You're talking like bereavement?
It's
Yeah.
10, just to be clear, Zach, it's 10 for bereavement, 10 for serious illness.
that was our discussion
I mean,
at the
10
committee
each,
because
not
it was
a
said
per
at the-
event.
It's a
it
per
was-
event,
right,
so
it was
like,
said at
Yeah.
the committee as to saying that it needed to be,
and
it still needed to be separated, that we couldn't lump them together.
that was a graduated, depending on the closeness of the
Right, but it would
relative.
say, well, I only get 3 days because it was my uncle, but yet it doesn't matter to anybody that my uncle was the one that raised me. Exactly, but that's the reason why.
Or the
I'm
one
trying
that
to-
stole from you and you hate.
True.
And you took off 3 days because of it.
Right.
That's the problem with it is if you have somebody, but the difficulty for us with any plan like this, and the other question, you've got it listed, what is serious illness? Now we've got to have somebody that goes in and acts as essentially a hearing officer on, well, is that your uncle? Do we have,
Right, and that's the reason why I tried to take that, or the committee tried to take that out, because to have to define it as such seemed as though that it was, once again, as professionals, should we trust each other in that regard? But then on illness, it does bode to think that if there is a question, the documentation should be, we're not going to ask anybody, I hope that nobody would be asking to see the memorial paper,
Some employers do.
I'll gladly go someplace else if that's what it has to be,
But then you get into the things that, if
It
it's just
truly are
open-ended,
offensive,
it's just
yeah.
10 days to use for whatever you want.
oh, yeah, but that's.
But then what, is there a cap per? 5 days at a time is what you're saying? So
That's what it.
max you could have is 2 5 days. Obviously, we don't have authority on any of those proposals to say, yes, we'll do it or we won't, but
Oh,
from just...
no, I understand. but
just speaking
It's a
from-
good dialogue.
Right, but I'm just
Absolutely.
saying, from my perspective on it, I'd be more willing to give out a finite number of days in the PTO to increase from 11 to another number than to this,
See, and then I'm on the exact opposite side, thinking that the board, if you bump us up to 20 days,
not that many. That's why I use the term finite, I'm thinking a couple
Well,
maybe.
like the city gives 2 a month.
But the city's also the ones that told us, be very, very careful about doing that because we screwed up and we gave way too many days and it's killing us.
So if we,
you know.
so your proposal keeps the 11, and then the bereavement is only as needed. If
per
you,
incident.
Yeah.
That you're not going to have people gone.
but if you bump it up,
But even if you go to, and we'll just use 20 days, because I don't know as to why I wouldn't want anything less than 20 days if we're talking about professional standards. But you're going to have people then becoming fully vested for payout in 5 years.
But and I'm not trying to beat up on anybody, but the 20 years the city has is based on a 365-day a year contract in which they work 260 days.
You're right. It's
a year.
by hours. They're hourly employees.
And then, and you guys have, I mean, we close for whatever we close for Christmas break, and there's no work, but, they get off 2 days, and if they wanted that all that time, they've got to use that 20 days to do that. So that, I mean, that's
Benefits
part
to
of
every
it.
profession.
Right, there's a plus and minus. So, and I've been one to tout the city stuff often, but I mean, I think that part of it, when we look at how many days, but when we're comparing to a non-school entity, it makes it, you just, at least you've got to look at it in scale. But I mean, I think 20 days, like you said, for a standard employee, about a month's time off is, maybe not starting, but, after you've been there 5 years, that's probably what most professionals are going to have, maybe more.
Unfortunately, I did.
My thinking is, we take away sick and we go to PTO, are you going to see an increase of absenteeism?
Yes. That's what I said. We have to assume that they're all going to get used. That they have it helps us that we don't have to go start having all these different classifications of leave. We have one leave pool. Everything comes out of that.
But
So
then you go from an unfunded liability on not knowing what kind of leave you have to now not knowing how much you're going to end up paying out for subs. I mean, it's always a guessing game, I would assume, for subs, but still, at least at the rate at what subs are being consistently used now versus increasing that absenteeism, I mean, that's got to be a shot in the dark. I mean,
well, that'd be up to you guys. I mean, you don't have to use them.
I know.
That's up to you. But
And when it's being said like that, I'll just say that it seems as though then the advantage is solely weighed on the board because it is being taken advantage of, because I feel like that the abuse, if there is any on sick leave or anything else like that, it's being done at such a small or minimum level as to why we're even having to really hash this out the way that we are. It seems as though that it is strictly at the advantage of the school board.
I don't think when the city went with this, the union fought them tooth and nail on it, and it was bad. And then they got it, and if you try and take it away from them now, you'd probably lose administrators.
Well, I'm just saying that I feel like teachers in the service profession are a different breed of people. And I know that
I agree.
I'll say that when we are asked to do more with less, we say yes. And we pull up ourselves by the bootstrap and we do that. And for us to be able to say no and to be wanting to be out of the classroom, it's not a want. It's I would have to say the majority of us, it's a struggle to decide whether or not if I can go in, and I wonder, well, I'm not running a fever. I don't think I'll make any of the kids sick. I'm going to be there. Those are the decisions that I think that there are hugely the majority of the teachers that make when they have to decide whether they're going to be gone or not. You know, that it's a huge pleasure to be able to be a coach and a sponsor and be gone for those days. But to know also that those employees at the city, like you said, even yourself, that for the employees in your office, they pull up the slack and they have to do, you know, the work, or the pile and desk just gets deeper. Unfortunately for the school district, you still have to put somebody in that classroom. You're still having to pay them. It's a completely different scenario in terms of trying to look at the way that PTO works in the school setting versus a different profession. And like to get back to where I was at, I feel like I'm a yes man more than I am ever to be able to say no to anybody, especially when it comes to the service and the education that I want to be able to provide.
But for those people that don't use it, you know, like we're talking about, it gives those people flexibility, you know? Maybe they don't need it 1 year, but they need it the next year.
Well,
I guess what's the downside? I mean, the downside is, you know, we have people that abuse it in the sense that, you know, they're taking it for the heck of it and don't care who has to pick up that extra work or that we're having to pay a sub. But for those who aren't doing that, and for whatever reason, so, you know.
If you end up paying more in the sub line, that's taking money away from other lines that money could be going into.
It's true. I mean,
What's that?
It's just the payout. The payout at a sub rate versus a payout at the end on other things, on severance or however it's described. I think it's a great dialogue to have. I mean, it's just to hear it out. I mean.
And I agree. I mean, it benefits the teacher. It does give us flexibility. And I know 2 teachers who had to take 1 day leave without pay because they didn't have enough personal days for the wedding they went to or something else. And yes, I agree, we want that flexibility, but.
Why is it that we have to hire a sub every time the teacher's gone?
Because I have a curriculum that needs to keep going and my subs work.
But
I don't show movies.
But aren't there other teachers that are there that day that could help?
No,
Not always.
not always.
Not on full time.
It's difficult. Elementary, probably.
The classroom
More.
of 25 kids, you're going to pass that
Plus.
25 kids onto the other teacher that's also teaching 25 kids.
No, I'm not saying you put them together, but I'm just talking about with plan time and.
Plan time is a completely different animal at the elementary level versus
Yeah.
at the high school. And it is an
I think they do cover as many as they can.
hour by hour as to what
They
you
they do a
can.
lot of that.
But how do you have both, though, if you're hiring a sub and then you pay them for a whole day?
Well, they have to
No, you
determine-
don't.
it's
If you
determined by
can't,
the schedule.
we've had days where we can't find subs.
Yeah, I mean, our
And
secretaries
so
do a great job of trying to fill
Find
that
the
gap.
gap.
That's not an everyday thing because you've also got you've got curriculum mapping, planning, things that you're doing on plan or your own stuff.
And the
And
sub
they
is-
ask, and most teachers are willing to give up a plan, but they're not, it's like, they have to determine how many, if there are several people gone, or if it's just a half a day, maybe they can fill that. Our secretaries do a wonderful job of trying to save them.
I know that in looking at Mrs. Barnett's folder that she has behind the desk is to understand that, yes, that there are those, but then that sub doesn't get the planning period. So like when Abby's got to be gone for 4th period because softball left, but the sub was there and that sub was covering for somebody who had a 4th period plan. That sub's right there in her room and you got her with a full day, person or, yeah, there's all different.
They
kinds of
utilize
ways
the
that you can
subs.
explain. But other than that,
So,
every
let me just ask
bit
you.
of the other language.
So you're saying on the leave policy, that's coming more from the calendar committee?
No.
versus
That's not
you
calendar.
No,
guys-
this was a separate leave
Sorry,
committee.
leave committee. So you guys haven't discussed it necessarily?
No, the leave committee was able to see these revisions. The negotiation team was given these revisions, but not with a full explanation to everything. So there could even, I mean, like I said, it's a proposal, and there could even be clerical changes on our side as well. It's not anything set in stone.
Well, just another thing, Zach, just so I understand here, that you're saying 11 PTO days, and then the bereavement and serious illness would be separate, but everything else then, and I know we had that discussion that what does that, what we had turned in to you guys. Everything else is included in PTO then? I mean, obviously,
Except for those things
maternity
that,
and
except for those things
family
that can't,
medical
I mean,
leave,
yeah.
but,
Well,
But that's-
jury
that's a
wouldn't
big
be.
chunk.
Jury would be above and
there's some
beyond.
that,
The designations of what does not count for PTO in the except for clause that was in here,
military,
so really what I did was I copy and pasted from our master negotiated agreement and included those in. They might be in a little bit different order, just because of where to move them, as to whether or not there was to be a clause to say that sections I through Q needed to be
Can we,
or R.
can we go through which one of those, I mean, because it's, I know you did it because of some ambiguity in ours, but, you know, we talked about illness or death, but maternity leave.
Yeah.
Are you wanting that section in?
Well, at least in the maternity leave, in the way that I thought that it worked was that the individual used the PTO and the carried over PTO. If they did not have enough to be able to meet the doctor's release, that they would be able to ask the the PTO pool committee for that time until that doctor's release. That's the way at least I understood that it worked. Having a 7'5" and a 2-year-old, that's the way it works for us, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
and then
And that's the reason why I didn't change any of the language. All I did was change.
They've used their sick leave.
If a teacher doesn't have enough leave through all of those things, then they pay the sub. Is that right?
For what?
Say maternity leave.
Well,
They use, for a typical maternity leave, when they're still under the doctor's care, they use their sick leave.
Right.
Until they're out. And then if they don't have enough sick leave to cover up till when they're released by the doctor, they can apply to the sick
Sick leave
pool.
bank. And if that didn't work or whatever, then.
Well, we do grant it out of the sick pool.
No, I know. but-
And then-
and then they could actually ask for another extension if there were major medical complications.
Out of the
They
sick
could ask
pool.
for another 20 for
Let's
those.
assume there's no medical concerns, they just want off 12 weeks under family
No,
medical leave.
the sick pool does not cover
I
that.
understand, but I'm trying to circle
If
back
they
to
did that,
something.
they'd have to pay for the sub, or would get paid.
Why do
We
we,
pay.
Is that right?
They'd be leave without.
Leave without pay. Because they can't apply to the pool until they're wiped out of all their leave anyway.
No.
hold on, I gotta do a little calculation here, because I'm just assuming the number's right, but I certainly. Yeah, I mean, like if you have a teacher that's on the top of the grid at $55,000, their daily pay is $307, based on 179 days in the contract, but they still get paid, they're not working, but all they have to do is pay the 95, we're gonna pay a sub, right?
In what example, I guess? I mean-
No, under any example that they're taking a day that they don't have PTO for, whether it be maternity leave or
What Greg is
use
saying
all
is
the
they're
days.
taking the dean, but they're not.
They're not taking,
It's a dean, but it's not. Out of the 307, they're paying out
it's
the.
not a bad deal. You can still take off work and pay somebody, you get to hire somebody to do your job, but it's a year-long contract. We can't fire you. You must meet the terms of the contract. And I understand if we negotiate a term like this that is in your favor, then you're not in violation. But you know, the agreement is you're going to work 179 days under the current contract, and you get the leave you have. But when you're out, I mean, most contracts, if you can't do it, you can't leave. right? Or if you do, you're in violation or breach of the contract and subject to dismissal unless you've got a boss that says, well, we're going to grant an exception because of whatever. But, I mean, we're still paying out the same amount every day, but we're not getting the same employee. We're getting a sub that may or may not be qualified to do it, or maybe we don't have a sub because we can't find one. But all you're paying back is if you're at that rate.
Which section are you talking about where we're paying the sub?
Any of them, right? If you use leave where you're not paid, or if you take off like a personal day.
If they run out of leave, then it's just, we're off unpaid.
We're unpaid for that day. It comes out of our check. We don't pay the sub.
At one.
Well, I thought you just had to reimburse at the subs.
No.
We were talking about something.
No.
No.
But earlier you brought up, I think it was under the leave section, that you
There
just
are
have to
some-
reimburse. There are some sections that say you have to reimburse at the sub rate.
You're right, under the bereavement and serious illness.
Right.
There are some there where if they need a little bit more time with the funeral, especially if someone were traveling or something, that they could, or like Zach said, if it was someone who was closer to you, is that,
That's under the bereavement, it's that
Daily
second,
requested
or fourth line from
45
the
days,
bottom
new
of the top section.
If unions request more than the 10
Oh.
days, that would be,
employees may be granted, for instance, up to 3 days of leave with salary deduction for substitute pay.
So if I have a distant relative who dies and I have a 5-hour trip to get to the funeral, I can take this bereavement, but I would have the substitute's pay taken out of my check.
Don't we also,
But you still get your pay.
Yeah.
don't we have currently, in our current policy, doesn't it allow for distant relatives or friends, we can use a sick day? Can we use a sick day now to take leave? Under the third tier there, the distant relatives or friends, for funerals, can't we use, if we have sick time, can't we go now? Okay, so I can look it up.
It says employees may be granted, for instance, up to 3 days of leave with salary deduction for substitutes pay in case of serious illness.
You're looking at the proposal, I'm
She's
looking at
talking
the
about the
contract.
existing.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to
Let's
pull it
see.
up here.
What page are you on?
Page 27.
12:47.
and I guess that, at that $55,000 rate, for that person's salary, and that one 225.
Okay, 3 days of sick
That's
leave.
a $245 deduction. That's the pay without leave, that's the deduction of pay without, leave without pay, sorry.
Okay,
That's
so
$255, because 220
This one.
is 0.4%
this one I think
of
needs to be
whatever
adjusted.
anybody's annual
PTO
salary is, but at that
more.
$55,000 amount, it's $244.44.
Well, and just to be fair, I ran it at 35,100, which I believe is still starting, isn't it?
What's
I
that?
think so.
If you just 179, it's about $196 if you do it just based on the
Mhm.
contract.
That would have to be PTO.
Or, let's say 196. but
Yeah, you said that.
so-
Oh.
Because it's a sick leave.
Currently, for the bereavement leave of distant relatives, they can use 3 days of sick leave. So if you have leave, you can use that to go to those funerals. Or up to 5 more days, and you pay the sub. We don't have that in this. Is that something we want? Or are you saying in this, if they go to the funeral of a distant relative, you would automatically do the substitute pay? Or would you have the option of using some PTO if you chose to?
Well, I think that was, the thing was that you always had the option of being able to use your PTO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on this, you could then use the 3 days and just pay for the sub. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So is this a change from what we have?
A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Zach, didn't you say actually?
What we have now refers to using some sick leave.
This is an
And then
updated
if we
version
go
of
to
what you said to
PTO,
us
that would
before.
just, it would just
It's
be
just-
without.
I thought that's what you said,
You
but
wouldn't
you
have
made some
to-
changes.
It's
Just
very
grammatical.
Yeah,
I need to
it's a
see.
change from sick leave
Oh,
to
okay,
PTO.
okay.
PTO, yeah,
Perfect.
it's not
Okay.
hardly.
I'm just going to tell you if it was, to resend it to
Okay.
us.
I will.
Okay.
Get that now.
If we get an electronic copy, it'd be.
That will
like
go
a
through,
Word
that's what
or
we'll go through
something.
then and make the changes on
And I
there.
think it'll be called the leave revised, which
Okay.
I could actually do that now. But
Well, I guess my question is, I get the impression from, maybe not everybody feels that way, but I get some impression that you guys don't want to go to a PTO.
Well,
Maybe
think-
it's strongly that way, and I'm assuming it's not that strong, I don't know.
I'm thinking we're willing to go to the PTO, but it needs to be more than 11 days.
Well, I guess my feeling too is that it depends on how many other leaves you're eliminating. If you're combining sick and personal into PTO, then 11 reflects what we have now. And it does increase the flexibility. But if you're lumping some other sort of leave that I'm not catching here into that, then the 11 would be a loss. So do you want to clarify what other kind of leave that you're looking at lumping into that?
If I'm not mistaken, we borrowed this language, right, looking at the other contracts.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the other
So-
contracts had PTO and then outlined what was covered under that and what was beyond that.
I mean, the problem with it is if and I know that we talked last time that, well, some people have PTO and they have all these other too. Well, they've just called it PTO. It's really vacation time in a different name, but PTO generally is thought of as you combine everything together. Now, jury duty, I think, is one you would take off of that list because it's jury duty. Military leave is on here. I think that would be one that would not be on there. But bereavement is generally included in that because, especially where you let you carry over up to 100 days. I mean, now, in year one when you get here, you're not going to have 100 days. You're going to have 11 if you have our plan or whatever you start with. And, I mean, that's how the people in our district that got to 100 didn't get there because they just worked here a long time. They got it because they saved it, and they didn't use it every year. And, maybe that's because they're lucky and they didn't get sick, or maybe it's because they came in when they did have a low-grade fever and could have been here and maybe should have been in bed. But whatever it is, you get it because you save it and because you've got good work ethic. And,
you're not abusing it.
Right. But those that abuse it, if you come in and you got 11 days and you abuse it all year or every year for the first 5 years, you've got nothing built up and nothing accumulated, and then you have that death in the family or that serious illness, at what point in time I guess my question is, at what point in time do the teachers want to go argue and fight for that person? Because I think the rest of you are going to have it.
Right. I guess in that other idea too is that I never thought of the sick leave pool or even a PTO pool being able to be used upon a request to be able to go for a family member's death. Because I'm thinking of it in terms of that individual who you can give out the doomsday scenarios and all that other stuff, but for somebody who is a new hiree or something like that, and a tragedy strikes their life, and yet here it is, trying to start out in their new job, and then they don't have the days for the leave, and it's like, well, we got to decide. Do I take the knock of $250 being taken out of my paycheck every month, or not every month, but for however many days that I'm going to be gone and that sort of stuff? And I can see both, I guess.
it'd be
ways
tough.
for.
But in some places, in most jobs, you're going to have, if you start a new job somewhere and you're on the job for a year or two, and your family member dies and you'd like to take off 2 weeks, but you're faced with, do I lose my job? That's great. Or spend the time, and is it fair? No. But most people they sacrifice and they're going to have to go back to work. It's...
And again, let's create a
It's-
policy and a contract for the majority.
And that kind of goes back to what I was trying to hint at, and the fact that majority of us are not abusing it. The majority of us is the reason why
No.
there's concern with the amount of accumulation.
Suzanne was at work yesterday morning and her mother died yesterday afternoon. So she was there when she needed to be. People aren't abusing it.
That's the tough part for me because it's just, there's 270, is that right, or 250? What's the number of teachers?
256 right now.
I mean, it's just hard to me to fathom that out of 256, we can unequivocally say that every single person is the best at what they do. And, I mean, the
Well,
law of
you
averages
hire
will tell you
good
that's just
people.
not
We
possible.
we do know from numbers that the personal days are only used at slightly over 2, and they can use 4, but they only use 2. So they could have already doubled that. They haven't. They're here.
Well, and so, the argument could be, well, then why don't we drop it down to 3 since we don't use the 4th? Yeah, I mean, it's.
Because once
It's
again,
there when they need it.
those things to where the board needs to be completely advantageous on it.
That's an average, and there are people that need it when they need it, when they're,
Right, but that's the
but
problem.
then when they
Average
don't
is
need
that-
it, they don't use it.
But,
And
but need is very subjective, the word need.
That just seems so cynical to look at, like people are just wanting to abuse
Yeah.
the system. And Greg, I assure you,
Okay, well, let's assume nobody is. Let's assume everybody's not. What happens tomorrow if we make the wrong hire and we hire somebody that does? We have no protections against that person, do we?
well,
And making the wrong hire.
Yeah.
if you just hire them and they don't,
If we
I
hire
guess I
somebody
don't-
tomorrow, we give them a year contract, and they've used the leave for that year, there's nothing to stop that because they can take advantage of every single day that's out there and use every day, right?
And that's the reason why I would say that PTO at 11 and for serious illness and bereavement, that there's the ability for documentation, that you don't run the risk of having somebody come in and take the advantage of 18 or 20 days.
Well, but nobody, you brought that number up.
I know I did, and I'll stick to 20 probably.
But, I think where I'm at on this is, we're looking at this, we don't put names to the leave time. And if you devise a work policy based on somebody that's sitting in a specific chair today that you really like, you're going to make a bad decision on that policy. You make it based on faceless people that it's good for the organization, and you've got to, our job is to protect the district. And, we've got to look at how that affects the employees too, but, you've got to make sure you've got sound policies in place to do that. And that's what, in contracts, as, we can't have these, but just, what we're proposing for teachers is the exact same thing that's going to get implemented for everybody else. So it's not just,
And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate as a board policy. I don't think that your licensed professionals should be making policy or negotiating a contract in which you would blindly cross-approve for classified staff. Because that's where you get into the predicament in which now you want to include people who possibly might have used it that aren't even in our negotiating agreement, aren't a part of our cohort. They are not. And so you can bring those examples in, or that those are lying in the back of your mind, but yet we're not a part of that group.
no.
And nor do I think that $65 a day for somebody who gets paid $55 a day is appropriate.
some of those numbers may be,
You made the comment
Well, right.
that you would make it a blanket policy for all employees, and it's like, that's not right. Those are bad policies.
well, but, you guys get the same policies that or the same benefits that most administrators get.
You went ahead and put your word in there to say most, because it's definitely not all.
No.
And previously, administration, at least in
But
some
the
aspects,
reason I
used to be
said
on the
most
same
is
line.
because principals, and the exception was those that are on 12-month contracts get more days off, and so it's difficult to compare that. But otherwise, the benefits are the exact same.
And most of our administrators are in the profession as they graduated up from being a teacher.
Right.
And they can either choose to go off and be those administrators, or they can, but our starting spot, like you said, with the exceptions who have more responsibilities and that are placed on them, that they have that 12-month contract versus the 9-month. You've already got the distinction between the two, but we're under the same profession.
But generally, most organizations have a leave policy that affects everybody. You know, whether, you know, no matter what level you're at. Now, pay obviously is different, responsibilities are different. There may be some other perks that go along with it, but
I still like to think that we're exceptional.
and we do too. But the problem with it is, though, is if we have 6 or 8 different leave pools, and, you know, then you've got an accounting nightmare to try and figure out who qualifies for this. And if you approve it and then say, oh, wait a second, I forgot they were in pool 7, and they don't have that because pool 6 and above does, but 7, you know, it's a nightmare.
Is that just a spreadsheet? I mean, isn't that just?
Well, but even.
It's a spreadsheet, but you've got to have every employee, and every time you've got to, it's a difficult management issue, and to track it financially is very difficult as well.
But even on the idea of how those leaves should not be cross-applicable, when a classified staff employee is not able to come into work, they're not being replaced. We don't find a substitute for a parent. We don't find a substitute for a custodian. We don't find a substitute for our office staff. It's back to the office scenario in which.
But that's
it's
actually,
just-
that
it's
argument
apples and
works, it is, but that argument works against you, because when they're gone, the other guys pick up the work. When the
Or it
teacher's
grows-
gone, we
Or
got to
it
pay
doesn't
$95
get
a day.
done.
Or it
It doesn't get
accumulates.
done.
It doesn't get done.
It just accumulates.
It doesn't get done.
I guess I just want to draw us back to the original. And that is, do we want PTO? And if so, how many days do we agree is feasible? I mean,
And the
PTO
question
for
got
the
asked
teacher
is what
is
was included, and then
flexibility
I think we
and
answered.
what
Do you
must
guys
be
need to
Then we got-
talk more about this? I mean,
Oh,
do you have
probably.
agreement on what?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I would have to think that we should. I mean,
I think we would all be in agreement that if bereavement is not part of the PTO, then,
You'd
I
want
mean,
more than 11
if bereavement
PTO
is
has-
lumped in, if PTO includes bereavement, then the 11 days is not enough.
Correct.
But if bereavement is separate, then that 11 days reflects,
Do we have a
Pretty
number, Dean?
We will find
As
out.
far as how much bereavement's being used a
We need to
year?
find on
how much
how
it's being
many for
used.
bereavement.
But we
and
want to
serious
include the
illness
2 days of
reasons. I don't
business leave,
think
so we don't
had that.
lose
Did we
that.
have when we talked
we
about-
did.
Well,
We got sidetracked on that too.
Yeah, I think he wants to.
Let's, if we could finish that, because we stopped at maternity leave, but, so are we saying that, I mean, I understand you're going to want language in about PTO, but do you want, other than PTO, are you wanting any additional days or for maternity leave?
oh, I guess.
I think it's just covered now by sick leave.
Yeah.
Because it is-
I mean,
But I'm saying in a
If we're-
PTO system,
and if we're still allowing for people to access,
or PTO or sick leave pool?
The pool.
yeah, a PTO pool, I don't think that
I don't think there'll be any change.
There should not be any need for
Additional
change.
days.
Okay. But on business leave, are you saying you would need additional days for business leave as well?
It was another one of those, that was an issue that our committee was able to get immediate feedback from Mr. Catt, and that was, out of the 2 years that he's been here, he had said that possibly has had to approve 4 business days.
Yeah, I was
It's
just
been a
looking
little
at
bit, but it's
something
very-
Tracy sent us. Business leave days used last year was total 7.
Yeah.
So if you want to take those 2 days and put them in PTO and have 13 days,
Well, if he's only had to do 4 days, then what, so again, it's almost like we're adding it for 3 or 4 people.
Right.
Let's just get to the point where, I guess I'm just trying to get a
It was
firm number. Are you guys saying you want it or you don't? Or if you're saying we don't want it, but because we don't want it, we want 13 days, that's fine, but just tell us what you want on that so we know what we're looking at.
well, I think what Kim said, as long as we can keep the bereavement, you'd be willing to go to PTO.
And get rid of everything else.
Well, I mean, the only other thing you're getting
But
rid of is the business leave.
Well, she said that, but then we started saying, except for this and except for this, and that's
I
why I said,
mean,
let's
the
go
only
through them
thing
one by
is-
one and see what
Right.
the exceptions are. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just,
So are you want to look at jury duty now? or court
no,
duty?
I want to get to the bottom of business leave. before we get into.
So we
Well,
just,
okay,
we just throw those
I'll
2
say
days
that
over to
The committee didn't make
PTO.
any changes to those that felt like that they were being abused. And so it wasn't as though to say that the individuals who needed those 7 days as to saying, well, that was just uncalled for, inappropriate, and so therefore it wasn't like we were going to say, so that was the reasoning as to why it stayed in there. It was.
So you want to keep that with?
It was just
the
to
plan.
preserve contract
Okay.
in making as few changes as possible.
And
But
then
the way I'm understanding though, you
Yeah.
would entertain if there were more days added to PTO or whatever, doing away with those. Is that correct?
I would think it would be in your advantage to leave business leave separate, since it has such light usage. You know, if you take it away, we say, well, if we lose business leave, we want another day. But if you
2
just,
days.
oh, 2. So then, if you just leave it as it is, it's only going to get used for, they're very rare things, because it's very narrow on what it can be used for. It's usually legal stuff.
I'm looking though, as from our side, is probably going back to the board though and saying, obviously you guys are saying if 11 PTO days and then we keep bereavement and everything, I'm saying, we're going to probably go back and look at basically saying, okay, well, how many more PTO days, X amount do we have to give to go through and start getting rid of some of the other stuff to pool this all together?
A lot of this stuff doesn't have any pay associated with it, though. Long-term leave without advancement and without pay, that doesn't have any pay
I'm
attached
speaking
to
of
it.
like bereavement, business
Okay.
leave and some
Yeah,
of
we're
those.
we're just trying to,
Right,
we'll tackle those
Yeah,
next,
that's true.
but, okay.
just on business leave.
So if you want to get rid of business leave, you take 2
You'd have
days
to
and throw
add
it into
PTO.
No, I'm just
Is that what
asking
you're-
if you guys
We're
are,
just saying, what are you saying you
Yeah,
want?
it's a possibility.
13
It's
days of
entertaining,
PTO and get rid of business leave.
Okay.
But it just doesn't,
Because,
Let's talk
I mean,
about
the way we
that.
were coming at this was to simplify. We
Yeah,
had
sure.
11 days and we were comfortable with that with the exception of bereavement.
Jury duty, you want to leave that in?
Yes.
yeah.
Just as it is, I mean, that's not really a change from where it is it? Parental leave,
Is that, do we have to do anything there, Greg? Is that a, or Bill, is that a?
We didn't get our initial.
No, I mean, but legally, we don't have, that isn't any prison.
you're saying legally, or
Yeah, no, legally, there's no,
if it weren't in there, no, you wouldn't have to do anything.
that was my question.
Yeah, because you guys even recognize parental leave on H, on your proposal.
And that's part of the PTO.
We didn't change any of these other than we,
Family medical leave, I think we talked about already, military leave, I don't think we had any issue there. Long-term leave without advancement and long-term, is that, I assume you still want that?
that's what I thought.
The long-term leave without advancement,
Right.
yes, and that doesn't have any, there's
Is
no
that what we
pay.
see other districts calling sabbatical?
That's what I would call it.
I mean, as I examined other contracts, I thought that that's what it seemed like, is calling it sabbatical leave.
Well, I mean, that's like 4 days, that's what they're going to call it, so. Now, then section M, on leave with advancement and without pay. Education leave, I should say.
Is that for someone working on a PhD?
That could be.
Yeah, it's the college credit has to be tied to it.
When was the last time we did that? Well, I
Nobody can
guess.
afford to take off.
Yeah, both, yeah. I guess they got a rich,
I don't know that anyone who has requested it, but it's there in case they
is
need
it
it.
something we need?
Well,
You
I
could
think
I'd
once
leave it
we,
in there.
together, long-term/education leave.
I'd leave
just
it
make
in there.
one.
it could be
It could allow
someone,
somebody to-
because someone may need to leave town to do that if they're working on a degree that requires them to move away. Mhm.
Well,
But it's not like you're paying them, so it wouldn't be included in the paid leave.
I would.
And I guess
say-
the big thing, the only reason I guess I think that we're asking on this is, using this as an example, and I don't know if it's been used, but if we've got something in here that hasn't been used in 10 or 15 years, why is it still in the contract? That's, I guess, the reason we're asking something.
There in case somebody needs it.
But if that's the case, I mean, our contract could be 300 pages long because it's there just in case somebody
You can
needs it.
shrink the font if the page.
Well, and I don't know,
But you know, we are an educational profession.
Yeah.
And so I think you want to guarantee that right to that,
Yeah.
for that
That supports
teacher.
education.
Yeah.
My question is, on this one, is it possible to see the idea that an administrator or somebody being asked to a teacher to say, would you be willing to go and get this certification so that you can be our specialist in this area? Can you afford to do this? And that sort of thing. And we're guaranteeing you that you will get the advancement for your college credit and you have your spot back here, because that's the way I see it, is just saying, but without this provision, you could go off for that year, become that specialist, and the district say, you know what, we just really don't see the need for that position anymore. We're just gonna see it.
I think it would be one thing if we asked for it, but just because somebody goes out and wants to do it, it's, one of the problems we ran into, though, in the not too distant past, we had teachers drop into that, which is of no help to us at all.
It may be granted, and that it is only.
It's got to come back before the board. I mean, it's, in my 12 years, or almost 12 years, it's never happened.
Right.
So, but again, it's,
I don't know. I don't know as to how, that was the only possible idea that I can think of, is to think of how.
well, I take that back. It did happen
So it's
once,
good to have a
but it was
policy.
never brought to the board, but it
Oh,
did
they'll
happen.
have to negotiate it.
And they didn't take any, it was with pay, so. The number N, or letter N,
True.
do you guys want that in, you want it out?
Is that something many people use? Is that something we have requests for?
I don't know. If I have to approve it, I've never approved one since I've been here, which it says I do too.
And then
so.
PTO cover that, they
I
don't
think
have
I'd
to
be
pay the
willing
sub.
to redundant to have.
Yeah,
So I think we could
We're
do
okay
that
with
one.
scratching in?
yeah.
Okay.
O,
We need a,
what's that? Is that the,
it's like I'm on 2 committees now for the KSDE that I leave. I'm 4 times a year, but one of those are during the summer.
are you serving that for the district or for?
Both. I come back and I usually write out a report and send it to Dean and
I guess, I look at that as if you're a member of a committee as.
I'm representing secondary teachers.
But if you're doing it as a USD 49 employee, I don't think that applies at all, because it's kind of like if you're a PE teacher and you're a coach, and today you've got to go coach because that's the job you're doing, but you still have a PE class, you're still both, but it's a job we've asked you to do. But if it's something you're doing just on your own for advancement or something, then that's maybe a different area.
Well, your professional role, it just,
Well, take for instance, there's different associations. So the Kansas Association of Teachers of Science, it's CATS camp. They hold their conference that begins on a Thursday and runs through the entire weekend. They usually use Rock Springs 4-H camp. If you're asked to present your educational material or research that you have done or work with your class, it seems as though that to serve in a professional role, to go and present at that camp seems to be how I would.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We're-
And you
we're
are there representing.
That last sentence,
Yeah.
Doesn't that take care of it? Because
No.
It doesn't?
No.
I mean, it's at your discretion whether you...
That's not what that says.
Requests will be
Submitted.
submitted to the building principal well in advance of the date in question. The superintendent and BOE reserve the right to regulate such requests at their discretion.
But that's assuming that it comes to the board. If we had that, it would say just what it said in the previous section, that the board would approve that upon, how does it read?
That was superintendent.
Number 3 under
can't you-
N, the Board of
can't you-
Education approves a submitted plan for professional improvement.
Can't you
plans-
mandate, Greg, that that comes to the board and the superintendent? I mean,
I would
when...
hate to see that turnaround, though. I mean, truly, as a teacher, I don't think, and I wouldn't think as a board member that you would be wanting to have to approve.
I don't think we
professional.
want that level of oversight. I mean, the board ultimately can, I mean,
And I would have
they
to
can
think
do
that-
whatever, but, you know, or come up with whatever changes or negotiate the changes, but on an individual basis, I mean,
It would
it's,
seem as though that it's,
But I think we
A
need that, and
three-wall
it should
approach.
come off PTO.
well, I think
No,
it should
they
be
need-
a superintendent approved only. I mean, I think the building principal language should be gone. The superintendent's not going to make a decision without their input, but, I mean, ultimately, and the superintendent can delegate if they so choose, but it's,
The principals have sent in and talked about professional leave, so-and-so wants to go to this conference or do whatever. And with Kathy, she does come back and do the reports and stuff.
Now,
But it-
our contract says if we have absences of this nature, that the amount of substitute days would help with the teacher's salary for that day. Is that happening?
For the professional,
Not
not
professional
professional.
leave.
Not professional.
Yeah.
How
It
do you like,
doesn't say that for professional.
Section N does.
we're on
That's not
O.
professional, we're on O.
Oh, you're on
well, but you're looking, are
That's
you
not-
looking at the actual
Yeah, but ours are in
contract?
different
they're
orders.
looking at the actual.
If you're looking at the actual, it's section N. If you're looking at theirs, it's O.
That's what she's looking at, and it
Yeah.
says substitute pay.
Yeah,
What page?
21.
You're on the right thing. It's just,
in our master contract.
right.
Needs to
Right,
have-
it's a different, but,
Sorry. It's O1.
Yeah. Because of the show.
Yeah, that's
Well, see,
another
the
one of those.
KSDE pays the substitute pay. Yeah, so whenever I come back from those meetings, I send the slip to, is it
A
you?
lot of them,
Yeah,
Those
and
types
they
of-
get reimbursed for the substitute.
You probably so. Actually, you could probably clean it up better.
Yeah, that's what I was just actually.
Which one are you on?
P.
Well, I skipped over O, but yeah. Or-
Leave notifications including emergencies?
See, and that's even changed so much because of the system that we use in ASOP. I doubt that that is a provision in which, how do you contact and do those sorts of things to where we all do electronic submission.
Not for an emergency that day.
That's a good example
Like-
of one that should be a board policy or a personnel policy, that as it changes, that we go from notifying a human to entering it in on a computer, or next year, if we change and we go, like if we did it now, we'd say Alio or ASOP or whatever it is, but if we switch to a different system next year, then we got to renegotiate the contract to have the language in versus we change a policy, and it just applies to everybody for how you notify for leave. But I guess for you guys, do you want that in there? And probably the next three could probably be lumped together.
I don't know, the leave notification including emergencies, it does seem. I don't know who else I would contact because of an emergency. Yeah, the secretary.
And so that's who I contacted.
I wouldn't-
Yeah.
And I guess you're right, I mean, I wouldn't even
I
be
didn't talk to
contacting
the
the central
principals, I went
office.
right to the secretary.
You start with, like you said, it's a personnel policy that you would know your immediate chain of command for emergency.
leave without pay.
I think I can say that. I don't know why the 225th
Maybe we worked
is the
220.
magic number.
Maybe we
but
worked that many days one time.
No, we didn't.
No.
No days. I think that reflects.
I was trying to put,
Trying, yeah.
come up with a good reason.
No, but, no, on that 225th,
If you look at it just on a 5 days a week, it's 10.4 months, if anybody wants to know, but I don't know if there's anything magical about that.
and I bet it's not even on, if it's not a 5-day week, it's gotta be almost exactly 9 months
That's why it's
of
in there
12
now.
months. Like 225 divided by 356 is probably gonna be like 9.
Take 9 times 30 is 270, though.
Well, yeah, you're right. Huh.
I don't know how they came up with it.
But
That's what it is.
maybe that's what that is, minus
Mhm.
the vacation. No, I don't know, but you figured, Greg figured the low end, and that's $196 a day.
That's
On
35,100.
35,000, and at 55,000, it's $145 a day.
Well, no, it's actually 307.
Well, yeah, because you took it from 57.
I just used 170, I just used the 179, the contract days. You used something else to
The
cover.
200.
Yeah, I think that's what the 2-something years, 2-something,
Yeah,
244.
244, 5, yeah.
It's 244.44.
But that's what the pay was, off of that. I didn't think that was need to change that. What do you think, Abby? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I
can't
can't
decide if we
negotiate
are
maybe
trying to
283
simplify
along
it
with
or
the other
not.
ones.
It's
Only
Well-
went up
goal,
and-
We are, but I think it's much more complicated to get there.
Now, you said that summer school week had to be in there, right? Because we technically still have 2 employees with summer school, is that?
Right, in
Yeah.
the learning center.
Well, and it's there in case you ever implement summer school again. We don't have to renegotiate
Just
it.
leave it in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I think we leave it. It doesn't
Leave it.
hurt anything.
I guess I'm,
What did you decide or say on P, leave notification including emergencies? Was that staying or?
yeah, which one?
The emergency
P?
one? I think,
Letter P,
P?
section P.
I kind of said,
Just leave
my
it. I
personal
mean,
opinion is just leave it next.
Well, I think, or say as per the personnel policy handbook or something, or referencing a handbook that those things would be kept in.
or it could be notify the appropriate building principal or designated contact person
Yeah.
But who's the designated person? How are we
In
gonna
each
do that?
building.
In each building.
Per building.
in each building. Well,
But
and
how do you know,
this,
where's that information
It's kind of like when you
located?
go to school that first day, and it's like, bell ring for lunch. Where do I go? Let's follow all the people.
But the problem becomes is if you're really wanting to cover everybody's backside on this, you'd have to have a written thing. And so then what happens if you then switch from building A to building B because of staff reductions, and then you submitted it to the person you would have submitted it in building A, but now you're in building B?
Sure.
I mean, it's,
well,
if you have a manual that says, or a handbook that says, here's how you do it. I mean, all we're talking about, who do you give notice to that you're leaving or not going to be there? It's, most of the time, it's going to, I assume the handbook's going to say principal, and then it's going to say whoever next. And or probably say assistant principal, if your building has it, and then, on down the line.
and that was in there so that people have a process, so if they have to leave immediately, that they aren't just walking out and some secretary is like having the responsibility of making that decision. So it's the teacher's responsibility to tell the principal, I have to leave.
And we're
My
not
basement's
saying-
full of water.
What we're saying is, we're going to still have that.
Sure.
It's just going to be in something that if we
Right.
change the system to an electronic system next year, we don't have to have this lengthy discussion about it. It just is, here's the electronic system, here, you're gonna get trained on how to do it, and you go pull up this window and you type this in, and then behind the scenes, they get to decide that it goes to whoever it was supposed to go to in the order before, by email, or however.
That would
happens.
cover that. If I notify my building principal, I could send him an email or a text, or it wouldn't have to be
He's
face to
saying-
face.
He's saying to change the language
Yeah.
just
But then that's the
to,
question. Does it
per
have to be
personnel
face-to-face,
policy,
email, by phone, by
so that
text? You
we
know,
don't have to change
if you
this
didn't
every
do it by
time they change
in-person,
something
does it
on the
count?
personnel.
I mean, don't you get that on your phone? I can imagine.
We had that when text started happening, including
Just doesn't
text,
seem
they
like a
were
big
sick.
deal.
It's a lot easier to text somebody you're going to be in than you have to actually call them and talk to them.
Okay.
You don't have to fake
If
it.
I give you
No,
your
you won't even talk to me.
So they do the cough after the text, you know, in the text message.
Do we not?
They don't have an emoji.
It's probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, either a mask or the little hot water.
Should we have a short caucus and talk about the schedule questions you had?
Can-
And then
how
let you
long
know
are
about,
thinking?
just like a couple,
Oh,
I mean, I know we're close. Would you like us to give you that?
I don't think we care how long it lasts, but all I'm going to say is, because we've got to caucus, we've got
5
to make a
minutes.
motion to go into executive
Just
session.
to look at our calendars and see if there's another date. You had,
Why don't we caucus until 7:05? It's easier for us that way,
so and you're talking about
provided we get done.
next week.
Every Tuesday.
You want like available dates? Do you
Or-
want dates other than Tuesdays?
Let's say on the
Not-
week, because I'm thinking that week
I'm okay
of
with
the
that.
16th, are we gone all that week?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know whether there'd be a different day in that week.
Twice. I mean, is that what we're saying, we're gonna meet twice 1 week?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Or we
I
can
don't
just
probably
meet.
twice every week if I
Yeah.
schedule it, so.
Well, I don't know.
Let's see. But we do know we're meeting next week.
Yeah,
We're meeting on the 26th.
26.
Why don't we just?
We can just
vote?
meet then, and we can just talk about it between now and then, if it's
That's
not
fine.
pressing to you. That's fine.
I don't know that, I mean, to me, it's,
Next Tuesday at 5,
Mhm.
for sure. And
Then we don't need a caucus.
We'll see, I mean, right now, you said you guys could meet the 9th, 23rd.
And 26.
Well,
Well,
of
I
May.
mean, May 26th. and then-
Oh, I thought you meant June 9, June 23, and June 26.
as many days as we can meet during then, and whether or not we want to do
So,
something.
yeah,
June
you guys-
30th.
Yeah.
And then we'll start the meeting with that.
Oh,
Should
June
be
26th?
Hopefully
No.
something I can agree to.
It was May 26th.
May 26th,
June
June 9th, June
23rd,
23rd.
and June 6th.
Did you guys, days,
Yeah.
you know, like the, our proposal on that, or where you guys think you're at on that? Like the 6 days and the
Well, that-
hours and.
We haven't even,
That's another
Yeah, we haven't even-
conversation.
that's
We
a whole
didn't know
new,
as to whether or not if District had shared any ideas on discrepancy with numbers on
No,
those
not-
contracts and
Okay.
contacts.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
talking
we
about
did talk
with
about
those
it.
charts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
But
Did you make charts, or do you have something I can send them from you, or?
I can if I get to talk with, from what we had as our discussion, I'll ask these guys if
Okay.
they want me to send
And if
those
you
along
do,
too.
just send them and
Well-
we'll get that, then we can have that discussion.
We looked at contracts, and some of what was reported on the graphs that were handed to us were not always in line with what is actually in their contract. So if we're going to be talking about contract language and contract requirements, we want to be looking at their actual contracts, not just what the district reported to KASB, because it's not the same as what's in their contract.
Well, we sent it to you, so I guess if we're wrong, just let us know. I mean,
Well, that's what we
That's
did.
just it.
Yeah.
And I
So
was
we've done
thinking
some, what they reported,
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
even taking the
We sent it
two
to you,
graphs
but-
and putting them together in
Right.
comprising it as a total hour.
Hours, yeah.
Because, because we talked about that right
I
away.
think it'd be
There-
a
One on
better
this one,
depiction of where we are if we
Right.
looked at it.
Well-
looked at it as total
Combined
hours.
them, and you and I had that.
I'll definitely get those to you.
Okay, yeah.
Because the graphs, like you pointed out, some were high in days, but low in hours. And so it would be more, if we're going to put weight into graphs, then we need to make sure we're comparing the same thing.
I don't think we are, and I don't think we want to play, I mean, that was just
Well, we
a
even
visualization.
had the question, like, where did the report come from? And we had clarification now that they all came from
KSB.
I mean, where you get it, or where.
Right.
Well,
And then like what we said.
But I know what you're saying, because it is reported different by.
It is.
There's no consistency in how it's reported. I
There
mean,
were-
We're just going by numbers that.
there were differences of up to an hour on the graphs of what they really report and what is on the graph. Another concern we had about the graphs was, and several of our math teachers said, the graphs are defined as misleading graphs because they don't start at 0. For instance, this one, this looks like it's 3 times more when it's actually 15% more. So that's
That's
a visual difference that is
That's only for that
exaggerated.
person that can't read.
Well,
The
no, it
person that
looks-
reads the numbers can see that the difference between this one and that one is the difference between that number.
Right. But then
You can,
also-
you can do a graph, I mean, I could make that graph look like they're all the same. If you stretch it, if I put 1,000 at the top, hours, and 0 at the bottom, it'll look like.
No, we were just saying that to start, I mean, they should start at 0. This one did.
But why, well.
This one did.
But that's,
Because it's-
I think that one looks poor, but that's why, because it's, I mean, that's personal opinion.
Right, it's all aesthetics. People are, some are visual learners, some of them.
Right.
The numbers are the numbers. There's a spreadsheet, there's an Excel spreadsheet that information was pumped into, and we could just circulate that, and then you won't see the chart.
And we also know that it's not intended to be misleading. We just
Right.
know that because when you generate a graph like that, Excel will do
Right.
whatever it
Yeah.
thinks that it thinks that it's.
You got to change it to,
The only other quick comment on some of the graphs that you're going to get from us is that do find it a little concerning in the idea of comparing hours in contact time with students when you compare a 7-period day or an 8-period day to a block schedule, just because of the amount of passing time. You should realize that when we look at 8-period days, there are 30 more minutes of passing time that are going into contact time on those schools than what we use out at Hayes High, because we don't have as many times that we have to pass. And that's the reason why you can have some of those larger discrepancies, because you can look at it, Colby, and realize that off their top contact hours, that you can take an entire hour off because they have a 30-minute lunch and they have 35 minutes of passing, to where we have a 20-minute lunch and we have 20 minutes of passing. And so when we're only talking about a half an hour difference in contact time from the bottom of that graph to the top of that graph, it automatically shifts us to third place from the left when you look at actual contact time with students in the classroom, because we have fewer passing and we have a shorter lunch than some of those other schools. And that's and I'll share that graph with you as to when you actually look at their bell schedule and how much time they spend in passing. But that's just another one of those things to where KSB doesn't regard or request for them to have to report it that way.
but if you go down and start stripping that out, then we could just say, look, we're going to take just the time that you actually are sitting in a room with students.
No, I did.
But, I mean, did you back out plan time too, or did you count that as student contact time?
I counted as student contact time because every single kid is in a classroom. We didn't talk about teacher contract day. I'm talking about student contact time, because every kid is in a classroom every single time. So that's non-discretionary on that.
But that gets to a more of a global issue than what this is. Because that's a district-wide issue. This is more of a personal issue between each individual teacher and the district. The contract is.
So do you,
Well, see, and I guess, we got two different sets of graphs. We got student contact time, in which it puts us second from the bottom. And yet there's only a half an hour difference between that second from the bottom to the top of the, and if the board only wants to see us move to the left on that graph by even adding only 15 minutes a day, which doesn't have any instructional effectiveness to it, because you're only adding 2 minutes a class period, then, I mean, if it's only to move, then we should truly look at how you can interpret that differently, because it could put us right there at the third place, I mean, by the snapshot. I can't argue with the contract, the teacher contract hours. I feel like, personally, I'll just say that there's excellent reasons as to why to put more time in contract time, and that's for a meaningful professional development. So, but that'll be.
So maybe the
much
next
later.
meeting, we can start digging into some of those. Will we
Well-
have what they,
I will, yes, I will email that.
Well, I
haven't
guess-
gotten into Mr. Pratt yet.
I mean, before we spend a bunch of time on graphs, though, I mean, because I did spend a lot of time on graphs, what are we comparing? You know, are we going to be comparing two different things?
I think if we wanted to do a comparison, it needs to be what Zach and I had talked about, if you look at length of day, the number of days total, number of days and hours, because if you just look at length of the day, some schools have a lot more, districts have a lot more days in the calendar and vice versa. Some have less and a longer day. So I think if you combine the two,
Hours.
it would, yes,
Total hours.
hours, then I think, but again, you have to go find out what you're comparing to. And if it's that same group of schools, maybe we can make the phone calls and find out how they report it. or
Are we
something,
trying
if
to
it's
negotiate how we draw up a graph, or are we try, I mean, because that's not where we were at when we came up with this. The board's at, we wanted the time for things such as professional development, for additional student contact time, for the benefit of the students, and that's why the days were in there, that's why all of that was in there. The graph was a depiction of where we thought we were at, and if you guys want to give us one, we'll be more than happy to look at it, but I think the time would be better spent. Tell us, hey, we think the graph's wrong, here's why, and here's why we don't like your proposal, or we do like this, but we don't like this, and here's how we want to change
Well-
it. I think that's more effective.
We had,
That could be a great place to go.
right, and I think we can look at where we are, because I think with the number of days and the hours, like you pointed out, some are high on one, some are low on another, so we could compare ourselves on hours. And I think there are a lot of good uses for more time, but I did ask the question last time about the cost, and there is a salary cost to that. So, you know, I think the board needs to keep in mind, what are their priorities? Which kind of days do they want to add? Are the minutes important? Because you're well, one thing I was a little bit unclear on, you had outlined an extra 30 minutes outside of like more time before school and more time after school, and that totaled 30 extra. But then you had on the student contact graph 15 minutes more for the students too. So are you looking at adding 30
No, we're
minutes to the
saying
whole
we
day
want-
or
of that 30
45?
minutes, of that 30 minutes, we want 15 of that to go to student contact time, 15 to others. Professional development.
Because in your proposal, it expanded the arrival time and the departure time 30 minutes.
Right.
So if you put 15 minutes in the middle of the day, that's 45 total.
We didn't say we were going to put it all at one. It might be a minute in
Total
each
30.
class, or 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, just for reference, because you were talking about 7 days, just actual days.
To the contract?
Yeah,
6, wasn't it?
7.
185. Was it
7.
7? Oh, sorry.
7 actual days, and then the minutes add up. 5 minutes is about 2 days, when you add it up over the course of the year. So adding 30 minutes.
That wasn't, our proposal wasn't, we were adding 7 days. We
Plus
weren't adding
30
minutes to
minutes.
get to 7 days, we were adding both.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I understand that. So you're talking about 7 days, plus the 30 minutes adds another 12 and 1/3 days. So that would be a total of 19 and 1/3 days.
Depending on how you look at it, because...
That's how we look at it.
Well, I look at it as 8 hours is a day.
But if you're asking people, you know, we had the conversation last time, and I thought about this a lot when I said people do work outside the contract already. And they do it by choice. And if I come in and work extra, that's on me. But if you want to contract with people for that time, then you're going to be needing to pay people for that time. So then we have to put a value on that time. And do you want to contract, which time do you want to contract most? Because if you, the extra 30 minutes does equal 12 and a third day. The 7 days, that's a total of 19 and a third. So, you know, a ballpark number for payroll would be $66,000 for a day. That's taking our payroll divided by 179, approximately,
That's
ballpark.
assuming that you'd get a, yes.
That would be the
If you had made
additional.
the assumption that we would do that.
We're saying that's
But-
the value of a day now.
I assume, though, that, well, I know that when we looked at cutting off days on the contract in years past, we didn't add up how much those days were worth and say, well, we're going to cut your salary by the value of that day.
No, that was in lieu of a raise, so that was the value of it.
That you got back
Right.
the next 2 years at much greater than, you got.
That was the raise that year.
Well,
Each
you
year
got
was individual.
Over 2 years, you got a 1.5% raise, and then the 2 years after that, you got 11.5%.
Those were the raises
So
for
over
that
those
year.
4 years, you got, what, 13%?
And we haven't seen anything since much.
Right. So,
Well,
you know,
That, I would argue greatly with that. That, you've had more years that you didn't have raises since then, but you have had, there's been raises a lot since then.
but not to that degree.
Well, no, but, I mean, go find somebody that got a 5.5% and 6% pay raise in back-to-back years, other than Kansas Highway Patrolman under Governor Sebelius. They got 25% in 2 years to make up with their competition in Missouri. But other than that, it
but
hasn't
I
happened.
guess, you know, we'll go.
And since then, they've been frozen and stuck. And state employees that got frozen, they never got made up for the year before. They could have gone 3, 4, 5 years, and if they got a raise the next year, they were happy.
Well, we could take the average salary and divide it by per hour and per day, and then we can use that to see how we compare with the other districts.
And we can,
I mean,
Well, I can tell you-
in my mind, it was about the comparison, where we kind of stood, and we talked about some problems with the graph. But so if we want to bring dollars to it, then I would think we should just do a dollar analysis within USD 49. We need to see what that looks like across other districts.
Compared to your proposal, like, your proposal is 1 day short of what Shawnee Mission works. So like Shawnee Mission works 1 day more than the proposal. And their high pay is $23,000 more than ours. And then,
What do you mean a high pay?
like their
The
highest
top
pay, the top pay. So I was just trying to compare
Well, and
even
I
things.
wouldn't do the high pay, because that's not where most people are,
Okay.
right?
That's the
I think we either
potential.
need to do-
well,
That's
but
a
I'm not sure
potential.
how those-
I've got a graph I can hand out to you guys
Mm-hmm.
that we got for you know, the 20-year average, which we've talked about, that shows we're the only district or we're the highest district paid in the state on a theoretical 20-year average.
And that's because we have a compact schedule.
But a
Yeah,
theoretical.
Absolutely.
a
But that's
theoret-
also the reason why when you get to the top, you don't get raises anymore, because you get to the top in 8 years,
Well- The
theoretical-
assuming
that
you take
theoretical-
the
No
steps.
grazing, yeah.
But, you know, there's 30-some steps in Blue Valleys.
But the
But they also
theoretical
have
is,
language that every year is an advancement on a vertical step.
yeah, they have some guarantees.
It'd
the-
be interesting to see if they actually took them every year. Although they've got a lot more money than we do.
Blue Valley has guaranteed vertical movement.
Our median income in Ellis County is about $43,000. The median income in Johnson County is $73,000, which is about a 76 or 78% higher than ours.
But the
Pick the schools that compared to us is what you guys had mentioned at the last time. So that is why we are using those schools, because those are the schools that you brought to us.
we're just, yeah, we're using those
Well,
schools.
The
You
reason we
picked
brought
them.
those is because they were brought to us previously about, you know, Shawnee Mission and Blue Valley.
I
But
think the Bueller and McPherson also guarantee work for the
Do they?
when they figure a theoretical 20-year average, then that's assuming you move. That is not taking into account all the freezes we've had, and we've had a ton of them. So I don't think that that is valid if we've frozen our salaries year after year. And there are people that, how many steps behind are we?
Six.
6 steps. So that, now we have a much taller salary schedule. It's not compact when we're freezing.
So now we're
year after year.
18 years
Yeah.
instead of 12,
So,
or 11, 17.
But aren't all retirees going to
Yeah.
that too?
yeah,
What, our average? I mean,
yeah, we're having a lot of
because we have
retirees.
I've read somewhere that 703 years of experience or something like that, retiring, as in Hayes Post, I think today.
But if we're talking about, though, looking at adding days, that's the formula we've used to add days. What does it take to put into the salary schedule to pay for a day of work? And that is the cost of payroll for a day now. So that's a reference point.
Well, I mean, that's, some of these other benefits we're talking about, one of the reasons we can't take steps every year and we can't put in a guarantee language is because, the average, we don't have the average yet, but we got a printout of what we're paying out for every teacher for health insurance.
It's a little $12,000.
It's high. And that'll it used to be the middle of the road as far as what was paid for health insurance in this county, or in the city of Hayes. The county used to be the expensive one, the city was the cheap one. We were closer to the county than the city, but I mean, we're spending $12,000. A lot of these districts have a cap at $7,000, $8,000.
But the insurance was about $7,000. Not everybody's
That's
on
a single.
$12,000.
We'll give you the list. You can see how many people are.
There's
Exactly.
a boatload of them that are over
Sure.
$12,000.
And that's families. That's certainly supportive of the idea of families and children, and that's,
But
if anyone's going to be children
it
friendly,
is,
shouldn't
Kim,
it be us?
but we don't have, our money tree dried up, and so we have a finite amount, and so the problem is if we want to be supportive of families to pay for that health insurance, you can't beat us up because we don't give you a step every year. I mean, it's not like we're out wasting this money that the board went on that cruise we're getting, remember guys, we're going to that cruise in a month here and we're going to spend $20,000. I mean, we're not doing it. We get paid zero. And so it's not like we're out here going, hey, if we could cut this money, we'd all get new cars and these guys will have nothing. I mean, that's the problem is I know that we're the bad guy that brings the message and says, hey, we're broke and we got to rein in spending in these areas. But our goal is that, we rein in the spending in the areas that affect a few, and we use that money that's saved to affect the masses. So instead of saying, well, those few percentage that can retire at 55 and get paid health insurance for 10 years, and the rest of you that are never going to see that or never be able to use that, we're going to come up and we're going to take that money and we're going to use it, maybe not every penny of it, because there's other things we need to spend money on too, and not just salaries, but that's how you have vertical and horizontal movement, if you have money, but we don't. And so the question then becomes is, well, how are you going to get it? So we can cut all athletics, that would be a way to do it, but that's not a smart way to do it. We can go start carving out at the high school every different activity or class and say, well, we don't need that class. We're going to get rid of them. We're going to get rid of that. That's another way to do it.
Don't you think your attrition is going to help pay for a lot of those things?
But that's a one-time savings. And then if you start heading back up, now you're...
When those senior teachers retire and the younger teachers come on, isn't that a natural progression that the money saved from those people retiring can go to help fund the salary schedule and the raises towards those younger teachers? Are they expected to stay?
Hasn't in my time. Could it
Well,
this year because we have a huge number? Maybe this one year it could. But, I mean, are you guys going to commit that we're going to have 15 to 20 old teachers that have that much experience and pay retire every year? I mean, we're not asking you to do that, but nobody can do that. And so then what do you do? Because if we give a pay raise, I assume you guys aren't going to come back and go, okay, well, we're going to go back to where we were last year and start at that salary
no.
versus where we're at now.
But
You're going to want that every year going forward, and then some more. I would.
That person's still gone. I mean, I think the difference in salary is still there, and so that can fund that person's raise. We have
One raise, though.
How much is?
It doesn't fund next year's raise.
But each year we deal with it each year, and that's why we're doing this in the summer and not in March, because we do have a better idea of what our finances are now than we would have 3 months ago. But I think that's something we can deal with and we can estimate, because those retirements are coming
Actually, I'd
in.
rather wait till October when we have the budget, but that's my opinion.
I did see a contract where they gave an incentive, like a benefit or a bonus if people announced their retirement early. So that was nice.
They have a penalty if they do it late.
Yeah.
We don't have
Yeah.
that.
Nope.
So,
We don't.
and we'd have a lot of people this year that got penalized. Because the detriment to us is if you announce today that you're retiring or a week ago, then we've got to replace that person, but now all the good people have already been hired.
Well, our resignation date isn't for a while yet.
29th?
It's 2 weeks, it's 2
Is it
weeks
the
after
29th?
your notification date. What's the board's notification date this year?
What was the
The third
one on the
Friday.
contract you were saying? That was great.
It's the third Friday in May.
I thought it's the 29th this year, but. could be
The
wrong.
5th, oh, is this May? It's the third Friday in May, so it'd be the 15th. Ours is the 29th. Our notification date would be for resignations.
But what was the date on the one that you said that offered the early incentive?
It was early.
What was their,
I
what
can't
was their
remember what,
date,
it was,
though?
it was like,
They graduated it. It was like one of them, one
Right.
that
I saw one that was,
was like, it started off in December.
Mhm.
Ours is
and
pretty
then they had
late.
one in February, and there was one in March, but it was like.
those are for
$500,
retirements.
$250, $100. I mean,
I
they are.
I think we'd be more than happy looking at something like that.
Mhm.
But it's got to go the other direction at some point too, that if it gets beyond a certain point, then the dollar amount goes up too, that there's a penalty. And, you have a subject to us waiving it, because you might have that situation in which somebody just has a situation out of their control that you could waive it, but for those people that just didn't want to because, then there should be a negative effect.
Well, we're running over, so shall we meet next week? Tuesday?
So.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Are you guys going to give us a list?
Oh, yeah, get your charger back.
Or take the position that we didn't notice it,